A racist woman humiliates a black man on a bus, but she didn't know who was behind her. Hello, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the M15 bus, illuminating the tired faces of New Yorkers going about their daily routine. The vehicle snaked slowly along First Avenue, loaded with passengers balancing between cramped seats and crowded aisles. It was just another ordinary day in the city that never sleeps, or so it seemed. Among the passengers was Olivia, a middle-aged woman with perfectly groomed blonde hair and an impeccable suit. Her ice-cold blue eyes scanned the interior of the bus with a barely concealed air of superiority. Next to him, a black man in his 30s wearing jeans and a simple shirt was trying to get comfortable in the cramped seat. The man, whose name was Andre, kept his eyes fixed on his smartphone, apparently oblivious to the world around him. But the tension in his shoulders and the slight frown on his forehead revealed that he was painfully aware of Olivia's gaze. "Excuse me," Olivia said, her voice sharp as a razor. "Could you back off a little? Your smell is bothering me." Andre looked up, surprised and hurt. He opened his mouth to reply, but the words stuck in his throat. Around them, the other passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said anything. Olivia, encouraged by the silence, continued, "You know, people like you should be more considerate of others. Maybe if you tried a bit harder, you could drive like a normal person." The bus was silent, except for the sound of the engine and the occasional sigh of disapproval. Andre lowered his eyes, his face a mask of shame and restrained anger. A few rows back, a man watched the scene with growing indignation. Michael, Andre's older brother and a renowned civil rights activist, felt his blood boil. He knew this kind of situation well. He had experienced it countless times throughout his life. But seeing his younger brother humiliated like this was almost unbearable. Michael took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger that threatened to spill over. He knew that reacting with fury would only make the situation worse. Years of activism and experience had taught him that real change came through dialogue, not confrontation. Meanwhile, Olivia continued her hateful monologue, her voice getting louder and louder. "Honestly, I don't understand why they let anyone on this bus. There should be some kind of selection, you know?" Andre remained silent, but his hands were shaking slightly as he held his cell phone. Michael could see the pain in his brother's eyes, a pain he knew all too well. It was then that Michael made his decision. He couldn't sit back and watch this happen. He couldn't allow his brother to be humiliated like this. But he also knew that he needed to approach the situation in a way that could really make a difference. Slowly, Michael rose from his seat. The movement caught the attention of some nearby passengers, who watched him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He walked calmly towards Olivia and Andre, his imposing presence gradually silencing the hubbub on the bus. When he reached Olivia's side, Michael stopped. His gaze met Andre's for a brief moment, conveying a silent message of support and understanding. Then he turned to Olivia. "Excuse me, ma'am," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. "I couldn't help overhearing your comments, and I'd like to talk to you about it." Olivia looked up, surprised by the interruption. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Michael, a tall, well-dressed black man, standing next to her. For a moment she seemed speechless. Michael took advantage of the silence to continue. "My name is Michael, and that man you're insulting is my brother, Andre. We were both born and raised in this city just like you. We're just as much New Yorkers as anyone else on this bus." The entire bus seemed to hold its breath, all eyes fixed on the scene that was unfolding. Andre looked at his brother with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Michael knew that the next few moments would be crucial. He had the chance to turn this painful incident into an opportunity to learn and grow. With a deep sigh, he prepared himself for what was to come, determined to face prejudice with compassion and wisdom. The bus continued its journey along First Avenue, but time seemed to have stopped inside it. All eyes were on Michael, who stood next to Olivia, his presence a mixture of calm and determination. "Ma'am," Michael began, his voice soft but firm. "I understand that you may have your opinions and prejudices. We all do. But what you're doing here today goes beyond that. You're hurting a real person, with real feelings." Olivia, still surprised by the intervention, tried to recover her arrogant posture. "I was just expressing my opinion. I have that right, don't I?" Michael nodded slowly. "Yes, you have the right to your opinion. But we also have a responsibility to consider how our words affect others. Let me tell you a story." He paused, looking around the bus. The passengers were attentive, some leaning forward in their seats to hear better. "When I was 10 years old," Michael continued, "I went to a toy store with my mother. I was so excited to buy a new game that I had saved up for months. But as soon as we walked in, the security guard followed us around the whole store, as if we were criminals." Andre, still sitting next to Olivia, lowered his head, recognizing the painfully familiar story. "That day," Michael continued, "I learned that some people would judge me not by my character, but by the color of my skin. It was a hard lesson for a 10-year-old. Olivia shifted in her seat, visibly uncomfortable. Some passengers murmured in sympathy. "But do you know what else I learned that day?" Michael asked, looking directly at Olivia. "I learned about courage. My mother, instead of leaving the store or fighting with the security guard, talked to him. She explained how his actions made us feel, how it affected an innocent child." Michael paused, letting his words sink in. At the end of that conversation, the security guard apologized. He had never thought about how his actions could affect others. That day changed not only me, but him too. The bus was completely silent now. Even the driver seemed to be driving more slowly, captured by the story. "That's why I'm here now, talking to you, Olivia," Michael continued. "Not to fight or accuse, but to try to build a bridge of understanding." He turned to Andre, who looked up, meeting his brother's eyes. "My brother here is a talented artist. He takes this bus every day to go to his studio, where he creates works that inspire people from all backgrounds. He's not a threat or a nuisance. He's a human being with dreams, fears, and hopes, just like you." Olivia seemed to be struggling internally. Her face alternated between expressions of anger, confusion, and, for a brief moment, shame. I didn't know," she murmured, almost inaudibly. Michael smiled gently. "Of course you didn't know. We rarely know the stories of the people around us. That's why empathy is so important. That's why we should think before we judge." He looked around the bus again. "All of us here have our own struggles, our own stories. Imagine what it would be like if, instead of isolating ourselves in our prejudices, we opened ourselves up to these stories." An elderly man at the back of the bus cleared his throat. "When I was young," he said, his voice shaking, "I was discriminated against for being Italian. I thought things had changed, but I see we still have a lot to learn." A woman wearing a hijab nodded. "I know what it's like to be judged for what I wear, not what I am." Slowly more voices joined in, sharing experiences of prejudice and discrimination. The bus, once a space of tension and discomfort, began to transform into an impromptu forum for understanding and empathy. Olivia remained silent, her eyes moving from one face to another, as if seeing them for the first time. Michael placed a hand gently on Andre's shoulder. "Brother, do you want to say something?" Andre hesitated for a moment, then slowly stood up. I just wanted to say that I don't hold grudges. I know that sometimes fear and ignorance make people act cruelly. But I also know that we can be better than that. All of us." Andre's words hung in the air, charged with a dignity that touched even the most hardened of hearts. As the bus continued its journey through the city, something had changed. A difficult conversation had been started. Bridges of understanding were being built. And although the road to true equality and mutual respect was still long, on that bus, that day, a small but significant step had been taken. The bus continued on its way through the city, but the atmosphere inside had completely changed. The tense silence of before had given way to a murmur of voices, as the passengers began to talk to each other, sharing stories and reflections. Andre, encouraged by his brother's intervention, decided to open up a little more. "You know," he began, addressing not just Olivia, but everyone around him, "every brushstroke on my canvases tells a story. Not just mine, but that of all of us who call this city home." His eyes shone with passion as he spoke, and even Olivia couldn't help but be captivated by his enthusiasm. "I paint the streets of Harlem, the skyscrapers of Manhattan, the parks of the Bronx. Each painting is a celebration of the diversity that makes New York unique." A young woman sitting nearby leaned forward, curious. "Where can we see your work?" Andre smiled a little shyly. "I have a small exhibition at the Lower East Side Community Gallery. It's not much, but—" "It's amazing," Michael interrupted, proud. "My brother is being modest. His paintings capture the soul of this city like few others can." Olivia, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. I never thought about it like that. About the stories behind people." Michael nodded gently. "It's easy to forget that each person we meet has their own journey, their own struggles and triumphs. That's why dialogue is so important." A middle-aged man wearing a janitor's uniform raised his hand shyly. "Can I share something?" Everyone turned to him, and he continued, "I came to this country 20 years ago, fleeing the war. People often look at me and see that I'm just a cleaner. But before the war, I was a university professor. I had to start again from scratch here, but I never lost hope." Her words fell like stones into a pond, creating waves of empathy that spread throughout the bus. Olivia, in particular, seemed deeply affected. I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't think I've ever stopped to think about the stories of the people around me. It's always been easier to judge." Michael smiled gently. "Recognizing that is already a big step, Olivia. Change starts with self-awareness." As the conversation continued, an elderly woman at the back of the bus raised her voice. "You know, it reminds me of a time, many years ago, when Irish people like me were discriminated against in this city. We were considered inferior, unwanted. But over time, things have changed. And do you know why?" Everyone turned to listen to her, and she continued, "Because brave people, like you two," she pointed to Michael and Andre, "refused to keep quiet. They forced us to see our shared humanity." The lady's words resonated through the bus, touching something deep within each passenger. It was as if a curtain had been lifted, revealing a long-forgotten truth, that deep down, everyone shared the same hopes, fears, and dreams. Andre, inspired by the atmosphere of openness, took out his cell phone and started showing photos of his paintings. The passengers crowded around, exclaiming in admiration at the vibrant urban scenes and moving portraits. Olivia, hesitant at first, eventually joined the group. Her eyes widened at the sight of one painting in particular, a scene from a city park, where people of all colors and backgrounds lived together in harmony. "Beautiful," she murmured, almost to herself. Michael, watching the scene, felt a surge of hope. He knew that one conversation wasn't enough to eradicate years of prejudice. But it was a start. A powerful start. When the bus finally arrived at its destination, something extraordinary happened. Instead of rushing off as usual, the passengers began exchanging contact information. Promises to visit Andre's exhibition were made, and even Olivia, with tears in her eyes, asked for the artist's card. As they got off the bus, Michael put a hand on his brother's shoulder. "Are you all right?" Andre nodded, a genuine smile on his face. "Better than okay. You know, for a moment, I thought this was just going to be another bad day. But now I feel that maybe, just maybe, we made a little difference today." Michael smiled back. "That's how change happens, brother. One conversation at a time, one heart at a time." As the brothers walked away, the echo of their words and the stories shared on that bus ride continued to resonate. That day, on a simple commute through New York City, seeds of understanding and empathy had been planted. And although the road to true equality was still long, that small moment of human connection was a significant step in the right direction. The days following the bus incident brought a series of subtle but significant changes to the lives of everyone involved. Like ripples on the surface of a pond, the effects of that conversation spread, touching lives in unexpected ways. For Andre, the impact was almost immediate. The next morning, as he entered his studio in the Bushwick neighborhood, he felt a renewed energy. His brushes danced across the canvas with a vigor he hadn't felt in years, creating vibrant images that captured the essence of his experience. "It's as if I can see the city with new eyes," he murmured to himself, putting the finishing touches to a painting depicting the interior of a city bus. In it, faces of different ethnicities mingled, each telling a silent story through carefully crafted expressions. Meanwhile, Michael was plunging headlong into his work as an activist. The incident on the bus had reignited his passion for education and raising awareness. He spent the next few days organizing workshops and talks in schools and community centers, sharing the story of what had happened and using it as a starting point for wider discussions about racism and prejudice. At one of these talks, at a high school in the Bronx, a young student raised her hand. "Mr. Johnson," she said, "how can we make a difference when we feel so small in the face of such big problems?" Michael smiled, remembering how he had felt years ago. Every act of kindness, every difficult conversation you have, every time you stand up against injustice, no matter how small, makes a difference. Change doesn't happen overnight, but with small, consistent actions. Across town, Olivia was facing her own journey of self-discovery. Michael and Andres' words echoed in her mind, challenging beliefs she had held for years. One Saturday afternoon, she found herself standing in front of the Lower East Side Community Gallery, hesitating. With a deep sigh, she entered. The walls were covered with Andre's vibrant paintings, each telling a unique story of New York. Olivia found herself immersed in a world of colors and emotions, seeing her hometown through the eyes of someone she, only days before, would have dismissed without a second thought. "Impressive, isn't it?" a soft voice said behind her. Olivia turned to see a smiling woman, clearly an employee of the gallery. It's amazing," Olivia admitted, her voice trembling. I didn't know." The employee nodded understandingly. "Art has this power to make us see the world differently. Do you know the artist?" Olivia hesitated for a moment. Yes. We met recently. It was an enlightening experience." Meanwhile, in a nearby cafe, the janitor who had shared his story on the bus, whose name was Alejandro, was having a lively conversation with a group of regular customers. Inspired by what he had witnessed, he began to share more about his life and experiences. "You know," he said, wiping down a table as he spoke, "for years I felt invisible in this city. But that day on the bus made me realize that we all have a story to tell, a contribution to make." The customers, many of whom had barely noticed Alejandro before, now listened to him with genuine interest. One elderly woman even suggested that he consider giving talks about his experience as a refugee. Back in Andre's studio, the phone rang. It was the curator of a renowned art gallery in Chelsea. "Mr. Foster," said the voice on the other end of the line, "I heard about your exhibition on the Lower East Side. I'm impressed by the emotional depth of your work. I'd like to discuss the possibility of a larger exhibition here in our gallery." Andre almost dropped the phone in surprise. That would be incredible," he stammered, hardly believing what he was hearing. As the sun set over the city, Michael sat in his apartment, reflecting on the events of the last few days. His phone vibrated with a message from Andre. "Brother, you won't believe what happened today. I think our lives are about to change in ways we never imagined." Michael smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and hope. He knew that the road ahead would still be long and challenging. Prejudice and discrimination would not disappear overnight. But there, in that moment, he felt that something fundamental had changed. The seeds planted on that bus ride were beginning to sprout, bringing with them the promise of a more understanding and empathetic future. And as the city continued its frenetic pace outside, Michael allowed himself a moment of gratitude for the courage to speak, to listen, and to change. "One step at a time," he muttered to himself, looking out of the window at the city lights. "One heart at a time." As the city awoke to another busy day, Olivia found herself sitting in her luxurious Upper East Side apartment, an untouched cup of coffee cooling in front of her. Her eyes were fixed on a painting on the opposite wall, a recent acquisition from Andres' gallery. The canvas depicted a scene from a city park, with people of all ethnicities and social classes living together harmoniously. It was a view of New York that Olivia had never really considered before, and now she couldn't look away. A shrill sound interrupted her thoughts. Her phone was ringing insistently. It was Caroline, her best friend and longtime confidant. "Liv, darling, where have you been? I haven't seen you for days." Olivia hesitated, feeling a lump forming in her throat. I've been thinking a lot, Carol. About a lot of things." "Oh?" Caroline's voice sounded curious. "Does this have anything to do with that strange bus story you told me?" "Yes," Olivia admitted, her voice low. "Carol, I think I made a mistake. A big mistake." Across town, in a modest apartment in the Bronx, Michael was busy preparing for another day of activism. His phone rang. It was Andre. "Mike, you won't believe it!" Andre's voice was brimming with enthusiasm. "The gallery in Chelsea. They want to do a full exhibition of my work." Michael smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "That's incredible, brother. You deserve it." "And there's more," Andre continued. "They want me to do a special series about diversity and unity in the city, inspired by what happened on the bus." Michael paused, absorbing the news. "Wow. Andre, that's powerful. Are you ready for that?" There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "I think so," Andre finally replied. "It's scary, but I feel like I need to do this. For all of us." Meanwhile, in a cafe on the Lower East Side, Alejandro, the concierge, was having a lively conversation with a group of regular customers. Over the last few days, he had become something of a local celebrity, sharing his experiences as a refugee and teacher. "You know," he said, wiping down a table as he spoke, "for years I felt invisible in this city. But now I feel like I have a voice, a story to tell." Back at Olivia's apartment, the conversation with Caroline had taken a serious turn. "Liv, what are you saying?" Caroline's voice was full of concern. "You've always been, well, you know how it is." Olivia felt tears forming in her eyes. "I know, Carol. And that's what scares me. I've never stopped to really think about the impact of my words, my actions. But now—" She looked again at the painting on the wall. "Now I see that the world is much bigger and more complex than I wanted to admit, and I don't know how to deal with it." Caroline was silent for a moment. "Liv, change is hard. But if you really feel you need to change, well, I'm here for you." In Andre's studio, the artist was immersed in his work, frantic brushstrokes bringing a new series of paintings to life. Each canvas captured a different moment from that fateful bus ride, the looks of disapproval, the confrontation, and finally, the moment of shared understanding. As he worked, Andre reflected on how his art could be a vehicle for change, not just for himself, but for everyone who saw his work. Michael, meanwhile, was in front of an audience at a community center in Harlem. He shared the story of the bus, using it as a starting point for a broader discussion about racism and prejudice. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he told the attentive audience. "It's a process, sometimes painful, sometimes scary, but always necessary." As the day progressed, the lives of these individuals continued to intertwine in unexpected ways. Olivia, gathering her courage, decided to visit Andres' gallery again. This time she left a message for the artist, an apology, and an offer to talk. Alejandro, inspired by his new platform, started planning workshops to help other immigrants share their stories. And Andre, immersed in his art, felt he was on the threshold of something truly transformative. His paintings were no longer just personal expressions, but a call for understanding and empathy. At nightfall, Michael received an unexpected message. It was from Olivia. "Mr. Johnson," the message read, "I know I don't deserve your time, but I'd like to talk. About that day on the bus. About everything." Michael looked at the message for a long moment, feeling the weight of responsibility. He knew that the conversation that would follow wouldn't be easy, but he also knew it was necessary. With a deep sigh, he began typing his reply, aware that each word could be a step towards healing and understanding. The city continued its frenetic pace outside, indifferent to the personal dramas that were unfolding. But inside the hearts and minds of these individuals, a silent revolution was underway, a revolution of empathy, understanding, and above all, hope. The cafe Michael chose for his meeting with Olivia was a discreet spot in Greenwich Village, known for its welcoming atmosphere and diverse clientele. When Olivia entered, her eyes nervously scanned the room until she found Michael sitting at a table in the corner. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Michael nodded, indicating the chair in front of him. "Please have a seat, Olivia, and you can call me Michael." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Andre was in his studio, putting the finishing touches to a series of paintings for his next exhibition. Each brushstroke seemed charged with emotion, capturing the intense moments of that bus trip that changed everything. Back in the cafe, Olivia took a deep breath before speaking. "Michael, I don't know where to start. What happened on that bus? The way I acted. It was painful," Michael added softly, "for everyone involved." Olivia nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I never really thought about the impact of my words. It was so easy to judge, so easy to look at people and just see labels." Michael watched Olivia for a moment, noticing the internal struggle evident on her face. "Olivia, recognizing a mistake is the first step towards change. But I have to ask, what has changed for you since that day?" Just then, Michael's phone vibrated. It was a message from Andre. "Brother, I've finished the paintings for the exhibition. I'm nervous but excited. This could change everything." Michael smiled briefly at the message before turning his attention to Olivia, who seemed to be gathering the courage to speak. "I've started to see things differently," she finally said. "I visited Andre's gallery several times. His paintings, they made me see the city, the people, in a way I'd never considered before." Meanwhile, at a community center in the Bronx, Alejandro was conducting his first workshop for immigrants, sharing his journey and encouraging others to do the same. "Our stories have power," he told the group. "When we share our experiences, we create bridges of understanding." Back at the cafe, the conversation between Michael and Olivia had deepened. "I grew up in a very protected environment," Olivia admitted. "My family, my friends, they all shared the same narrow views. I was never really challenged to think differently." Michael nodded understandingly. "It's easy to get stuck in a bubble, but now that you're aware of it, what do you intend to do about it?" Olivia hesitated. I don't know. Part of me wants to change, to learn, to grow. But another part is scared. What if I lose everything I know? Change is scary, Michael agreed, but personal growth often requires us to step out of our comfort zone. Just then, Olivia's phone rang. It was Caroline. "Sorry," she muttered to Michael, answering quickly. "Carol, now's not a good time." "Liv!" Caroline's voice sounded agitated. "You're not going to believe this. Someone leaked a video of the incident on the bus. It's everywhere on social media." Olivia paled, her eyes widening in shock. Michael, noticing her expression, leaned forward with concern. "What happened?" he asked. With trembling hands, Olivia showed Michael the video on her phone. It was a clear recording of the incident on the bus, capturing every cruel word she had said. This is going to ruin my life," Olivia whispered, the panic evident in her voice. Michael watched the video in silence for a moment before looking back at Olivia. Maybe, he said softly. This is an opportunity. An opportunity? Olivia repeated, incredulous. How can this be an opportunity? To show the world that people can change, Michael replied. To turn this moment of shame into a catalyst for growth and understanding. As Olivia absorbed these words, Michael's phone rang again. It was Andre. Mike, Andre's voice sounded urgent. Have you seen the video? It's everywhere. People are looking for me to comment. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. Andre, listen. This is bigger than all of us right now. We need to think carefully about how to respond. When he hung up, Michael turned to Olivia, who seemed to be on the verge of a breakdown. Olivia, he said gently, what happened on that bus was wrong, but what we do now, how we respond to it, is what really matters. Olivia looked at Michael, her eyes full of fear and uncertainty. What do you suggest? Michael took a deep breath. I think it's time we face this head-on. All of us. You, me, Andre, and everyone else involved. It's time to have an honest and open conversation about racism, prejudice, and the power of change. As the cafe around them continued its normal buzz, Michael and Olivia found themselves at the epicenter of a storm that was about to shake New York to its core. The viral video had exposed a deep wound in society, and now it was up to them to decide whether to let that wound become infected or to use it as a starting point for healing. The city outside continued its frenetic pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding in that small cafe. But the decisions made there, at that moment, had the potential to echo far beyond the streets of New York, challenging people across the country to confront their own prejudices and seek change. The morning sun had barely risen over the skyscrapers of New York when Michael's phone started ringing incessantly. News of the viral video had spread like wildfire through dry straw, and now the whole city seemed to be in an uproar. Michael took a call from Andre, who sounded agitated. Mike, this is getting out of hand. I've received invitations for interviews from all the major broadcasters. What should we do? Meanwhile, Olivia was curled up on her sofa, watching the reactions on social media in horror. Her face was splashed everywhere, accompanied by hashtags such as #racist, #buslady, and #cancelolivia. She felt like her world was falling apart. At the Bronx Community Center, Alejandro arrived for his daily workshop, only to find a crowd of reporters waiting for him. Mr. Ramirez, one of them shouted, how does it feel to be a victim of such explicit racism? Michael, realizing the gravity of the situation, decided to act. He called an emergency meeting in his apartment, inviting Andre, Olivia, and Alejandro. We need to face this together, he told the assembled group. This is an opportunity to turn something negative into a force for change. Olivia, still visibly shaken, spoke in a trembling voice. I don't know if I can do this. People hate me. They're right to hate me. Andre, surprising everyone, put a comforting hand on Olivia's shoulder. Hate only breeds more hate. Maybe this is a chance to show the world that people can change. Alejandro nodded in agreement. My journey has taught me that forgiveness and understanding are more powerful than revenge. As they discussed their options, Michael's phone rang again. It was Lisa Chen, a renowned New York Times journalist. Mr. Johnson, she said, we're planning a special report on the bus incident. We'd like to interview everyone involved. It would be an opportunity to tell the full story from all angles. Michael looked at the group, an idea forming in his mind. What if, instead of separate interviews, we did a round table, all of us together, openly discussing what happened and what we've learned? The suggestion was met with a tense silence. Olivia looked terrified at the idea, while Andre and Alejandro exchanged uncertain glances. It would be risky, Andre pondered, but it could also be incredibly powerful. Olivia, taking a deep breath, finally spoke. I think I owe it to all of you. The chance to apologize publicly and show that I'm trying to change. Alejandro smiled gently. Sometimes courage lies not in not being afraid, but in acting in spite of fear. Michael, sensing the moment, got back on the phone with Lisa. "We have a proposal for you." In the days that followed, the city buzzed with anticipation. News of the round table spread quickly, sparking heated debates in every corner of New York. Andre immersed himself in his work, creating a series of paintings that captured the emotional intensity of recent events. Each brushstroke seemed to tell a story of pain, hope, and possible redemption. Olivia, for her part, spent hours in intensive therapy, confronting years of ingrained prejudices and struggling to understand her own actions. It was a painful but necessary process. Alejandro continued his workshops, now with a new urgency. He saw in every face in the room the potential for change and understanding. The day before the round table, Michael brought the group together once again. "Tomorrow will be difficult," he said, looking each one in the eye. "We will be honest, vulnerable, and brave. But remember, we're not just doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for every single person who has ever felt judged, excluded, or silenced." As night fell over the city, each of the participants prepared in their own way for the day to come. Olivia rehearsed her apology in front of the mirror, tears streaming down her face. Andre was putting the finishing touches to a painting he planned to unveil during the discussion. Alejandro read letters of support from his community, finding strength in their words. And Michael, alone in his apartment, looked out of the window at the city he loved. He knew that what would happen tomorrow could change lives, not just theirs, but potentially millions of people watching. "May we find the courage to be honest," he muttered to himself, "and the wisdom to be compassionate." As the evening progressed, a sense of anticipation hung over the city. Tomorrow, New York, and perhaps the world, would witness a conversation that could open hearts, challenge minds, and perhaps start a wave of long overdue change. The storm was coming, but with it came the promise of a new dawn. The sun rose over New York, illuminating a city in suspense. The streets, normally bustling at this time of the morning, seemed strangely quiet, as if the metropolis itself was holding its breath in anticipation. In the New York Times studio, technicians were running around, adjusting lights and checking microphones. Lisa Chen, the journalist who would be mediating the roundtable, reviewed her notes one last time, aware of the weight of responsibility she was carrying. Michael was the first to arrive, his face a mask of calm determination. "Good morning, Lisa," he greeted. "Are we ready for this?" Lisa smiled nervously. "As ready as we can be for something unprecedented." Andre arrived next, carrying a covered canvas under his arm. His eyes shone with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Alejandro entered shortly after, wearing his janitor's uniform. "I want people to see me as I really am," he explained, when Michael raised a questioning eyebrow. Olivia was the last to arrive, her steps hesitant as she entered the studio. She looked pale, and her eyes were red, evidence of a bad night's sleep. When everyone was seated, Lisa signaled to the cameras. "We're on in 5, 4, 3, 2... "Good morning, New York," Lisa began, her voice firm. "Today we have with us the protagonists of an incident that has shaken our city and exposed deep wounds in our society. We're here to have an honest conversation about racism, prejudice, and the potential for change." Michael was the first to speak. "Thank you for giving us this opportunity, Lisa. What happened on that bus was painful, but we believe it can be a catalyst for positive change." Olivia, visibly nervous, took the floor next. I want to start by apologizing. My actions that day were unforgivable. I was cruel, prejudiced, and completely blind to the damage I was causing." A heavy silence fell over the studio. Lisa leaned forward. "Olivia, what made you realize that you needed to change?" Olivia took a deep breath. "It was a process. Seeing the video, hearing the reactions, but mostly it was visiting Andres' gallery. Seeing the city through his eyes made me realize how much I was missing out on because of my prejudice." Andre smiled gently. Art has the power to make us see the world in new ways. That's why I brought this today. He uncovered the canvas he had brought, revealing a powerful painting of the inside of the bus, capturing the tension and emotion of that fateful moment. Alejandro spoke next, his voice soft but firm. When I came to this country, I faced a lot of prejudice, but I also found kindness and opportunities. What happened on the bus reminded me that we still have a lot of work to do, but also that change is possible. As the conversation deepened, the initial tension began to dissipate. Olivia shared her journey of self-discovery, tears running freely down her face as she talked about confronting her own deep-rooted prejudices. Andre spoke about how his art has become a tool to promote understanding and empathy. He revealed plans for an exhibition dedicated to telling stories of diversity and unity in the city. Alejandro shared moving stories of his work with other immigrants, highlighting how the bus incident had inspired many to share their own experiences of discrimination. Michael, acting as a kind of anchor for the discussion, continually brought the conversation back to broader themes of social responsibility and the need for collective action against racism. As the hour progressed, something remarkable began to happen. The phone lines in the studio began to flash frantically, with viewers calling in to share their own stories and reactions. Lisa, sensing the moment, decided to open the lines. "Looks like we've touched on something important here. Let's hear from some of our viewers." The stories began to flow. A man from Staten Island admitted to having had thoughts similar to Olivia's, and how the discussion had made him question his own attitudes. A woman from Queens cried on the phone, thanking Alejandro for giving voice to the experiences of immigrants. As the broadcast drew to a close, Lisa asked one last question. "What do each of you hope people take away from this conversation?" Olivia was the first to respond. "I hope people see that change is possible, that it's never too late to confront our prejudices and work towards being better." Andre nodded. "I want people to see the beauty in diversity, that they understand that our differences make us stronger, not weaker." Alejandro smiled. "I hope this conversation inspires more dialogue, that people aren't afraid to ask questions, to learn, to grow." Michael concluded, "My hope is that this is just the beginning, that from today onwards, every person who has watched this broadcast will feel inspired to do their bit to fight racism and promote understanding." When the cameras finally switched off, there was a moment of silence in the studio. Then slowly, applause began to echo. Technicians, cameras, even Lisa, everyone was on their feet applauding. Olivia, still shaking with emotion, looked at Michael, Andre, and Alejandro. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me the chance to be better." As the group left the studio, they were greeted by a crowd outside. People of all ages and backgrounds had gathered, some holding signs of support, others simply wanting to shake their hands and say thank you. New York, always on the move, seemed to have stopped for a moment, and at that moment, a feeling hung in the air that something had changed. A difficult conversation had begun, and with it, the promise of a more understanding and inclusive future. In the weeks that followed the broadcast of the Roundtable, New York seemed to vibrate with a different energy. The frank and moving conversation had touched a nerve in the city, triggering discussions in homes, offices, schools, and even on the streets. Michael, sitting in his office at the civil rights organization where he worked, could barely keep up with the flow of emails and phone calls. Requests for talks, workshops, and consultancies were pouring in from all corners of the city and beyond. "Mike," her assistant Ashley called from the doorway, "there's a call from City Hall on line 2. They want to discuss the possibility of implementing a diversity awareness program in all public schools." Michael nodded, a tired but satisfied smile on his face. "Thanks, Ashley. He'll take it." Meanwhile, on the Lower East Side, Andres' gallery was packed. His new series of paintings, inspired by recent events, had become the talk of the moment in the New York art world. Mr. Foster, a renowned art critic, approached Andre, who was explaining one of his works to a group of visitors. "Your work impressively captures the complexity of race relations in our city. How do you see the role of art in promoting social change?" Andre paused, considering the question. "Art has the power to make us see the world through someone else's eyes," he replied. It can challenge our perceptions, provoke emotions, and inspire empathy. In times like these, I believe that art isn't just important, it's essential. In the Bronx, Alejandro was busy with his own project. What began as a small workshop for immigrants had turned into a large-scale community program. With the support of local organizations and even some businesses, he was helping immigrants share their stories through a variety of mediums: writing, art, music, and even theater. "Mr. Ramirez," called out Elena, a young participant in the program. "Thanks to you, I got an internship at a local radio station. They want me to produce a series about immigrant experiences." Alejandro smiled broadly, pulling Elena into a hug. "I'm so proud of you. You see, your stories are important. They deserve to be heard." On the Upper East Side, Olivia was facing her own challenges. Many of her old friends had drifted away after the incident, unable or unwilling to accept her change of perspective. But surprisingly, she found that she didn't feel as alone as she had expected. That afternoon, she was taking part in a discussion group on privilege and systemic racism. It was something she would never have considered doing a few weeks ago, but now it felt like a crucial part of her journey. "Olivia," called out the group facilitator, a black woman called Tanya, "would you like to share your reflections on this week's reading?" Olivia took a deep breath. "It's been challenging. Confronting my own prejudices, understanding the concept of white privilege. It's uncomfortable. But I'm learning that this discomfort is necessary for growth." Tanya smiled encouragingly. "That's exactly what it's all about. Thank you for your honesty." As the sun set over the city, the four protagonists of our story gathered for dinner at Michael's apartment. It had become something of a tradition for them, a time to reflect and reconnect. "So," Michael said, as they served dessert, "how is everyone coping with all this?" Andre laughed softly. "It's surreal. I never imagined that my paintings would have this kind of impact." Alejandro nodded. "I know what you mean. The program at the community center is growing faster than I could have dreamed." Olivia, who had been quiet for most of the night, finally spoke. I wanted to thank you all. I know I don't deserve the forgiveness or the second chance you've given me, but I'm truly grateful." Michael reached out, gently squeezing Olivia's shoulder. "The true test of character is not whether we never make mistakes, but how we respond to them. You're doing the hard work, Olivia. That counts for something." As the evening progressed, the conversation flowed freely. They discussed the challenges they still faced, the small victories they celebrated, and their dreams for the future. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace. But inside that apartment, four individuals who had once been on opposite sides of an abyss of prejudice now found themselves united by a common purpose. As they said goodbye, each carried with them a renewed sense of hope and determination. They knew that the work was far from over. Real change would take time, continuous effort, and many difficult conversations. But looking at the city they loved, illuminated against the night sky, they felt that something fundamental had changed. A conversation had been started, and now it was up to them, and all New Yorkers, to keep it alive and turn it into concrete action. The waves of change they had started would continue to spread, touching lives in ways they could barely imagine. And while New York slept, tomorrow promised new possibilities, new challenges, and above all, renewed hope. A year has passed since that fateful bus ride that changed the lives of Michael, Andre, Alejandro, and Olivia. New York, ever evolving, seemed to have absorbed the lessons of that incident, transforming them into something greater. It was a sunny Saturday morning and Central Park was buzzing with activity. On the Great Lawn, a diverse crowd was gathering for the first New York Unity Festival, an event born directly from the waves of change initiated by our four protagonists. Michael, wearing a t-shirt that read, "Together we are stronger," took to the main stage. His imposing presence silenced the crowd. "Welcome, New Yorkers!" His voice rang out over the loudspeakers. "A year ago, our city faced a time of division. Today, We are here to celebrate our unity, our diversity, and our continued commitment to positive change." The crowd applauded enthusiastically. Among them, Andre smiled, holding the hand of his girlfriend, a young artist he met at one of his exhibitions. Next to him, Alejandro was surrounded by a group of young immigrants, all wearing T-shirts from the community program he had expanded to the whole city. Michael continued, "We have a lot to celebrate today. Our diversity awareness program is now part of the curriculum in every public school in New York. More than 500 companies have joined our workplace equity commitment. And most importantly, the difficult conversations we started a year ago are still happening in homes, schools, and communities across the city." As Michael spoke, Olivia arrived discreetly, stopping on the outskirts of the crowd. She was still struggling with the shame of her past actions, but was determined to continue her work of self-reflection and change. "And now," Michael announced, "it is my pleasure to introduce you to someone who embodies the journey we are all on. Please welcome Olivia Carter." A murmur of surprise went through the crowd. Olivia, visibly nervous, made her way to the stage. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Good morning, New York," she began, her voice shaky. "Many of you know me as the racist woman on the bus. And yes, I was that person. I made terrible mistakes, fueled by years of prejudice and ignorance." The crowd was silent, listening intently. "But I'm here today not to apologize, although I continue to do that every day, but to show that change is possible. This past year has been a journey of learning, growth, and above all, humility." Olivia paused, tears shining in her eyes. "I've learned that true power doesn't come from diminishing others, but from elevating all of us. I've learned that diversity is not a threat, but our greatest strength. And I've learned that it's never too late to change, to be better." The crowd erupted in applause. Andre and Alejandro exchanged looks of approval. Michael, standing next to Olivia, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. The festival continued, a vibrant celebration of New York's diversity. There was food from all over the world, cultural performances, awareness-raising workshops, and, of course, an art exhibition led by Andre. As the day progressed, our four protagonists found a moment to gather away from the crowds. "Who knew," Andre reflected, that bus ride would bring us here?" Alejandro smiled. "Life has a funny way of surprising us. Sometimes the most difficult moments can lead to the greatest transformations." Olivia, still emotional from his speech, nodded. "I can never thank you enough for not giving up on me, for showing me a better way." Michael looked at each of them with pride. "What we've achieved here is just the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but looking at this crowd today, I know we're not alone on this journey." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, the four friends, because that's what they had become, observed the scene before them. Families of all backgrounds shared meals, children of different races played together, and everywhere there was a palpable sense of hope and unity. New York has always been a city of stories of struggle, of triumph, of redemption. And now, thanks to four unlikely individuals who found the courage to face their own prejudices and inspire others to do the same, a new story was being written. A story of a city that faced its shadows and chose the light. A story of people who, in the face of division, chose unity. A story of hope, change, and a brighter future for all. As the festival lights shone against the darkened sky, Michael, Andre, Alejandro, and Olivia knew that their journey was far from over. But looking at the city they loved, vibrant and united, they felt a deep certainty. The best was yet to come. And so, as New York prepared for another nightfall, there was a feeling in the air, a feeling that, no matter how long the night, a new dawn always waits on the horizon. A dawn of understanding, of acceptance, and above all, of love. If you had been on that bus on the day of the incident, what would your reaction have been? And now, after following people's journey of transformation, how do you think you would react if you witnessed a similar situation today? Think about it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.